The academy cafeteria was always filled with noise, with laughter, with dozens of alien voices mixing in the air and floating like tangled twate. Music, but there was always one table that stayed quiet, one seat that remained empty next to a girl with silver skin and dark green eyes who sat alone every day with her tray untouched and her head down. Her name was Selah, and no one wanted to sit near her, not because she was mean or strange, but because of her scent. A scent that hung around her like invisible fog, heavy and earthy like soil after rain, mixed with something ancient, something wild, something no one could describe. She sat in silence as others walked past her, without a glance. Some wrinkled their noses, others whispered behind her back. Some even changed their routes just to avoid passing close to her. Her scent was a mystery, one that made her the loneliest person in the whole academy. No matter how big the crowd, she was always surrounded by distance, by silence, by fear. But that day, everything changed because a new student arrived late in the middle of the lunch period, when all eyes were already locked on their food or their conversations. He was human, tall, with dark hair and a relaxed smile. His name was Liam, and unlike the others, he walked through the cafeteria, not looking for a familiar face, but simply searching for an open seat, and then he saw it, the only empty spot in the entire place. Right next to Selah's cafeteria, froze forks paused in midair, mouths stayed open halfway through. Bite's eyes widened as Liam stepped closer. Every student expected him to stop, to hesitate, to turn away, like everyone else had done 100 times before, but he didn't. He just pulled out the chair and sat down like it was the most normal thing in the world. Selah looked at him with shock, her eyes blinking slowly as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, the scent wrapped around Liam like a wave, and he paused, his eyes closed for a second, and then something strange happened. He smiled. He actually smiled. That scent, which made others turn away, made Liam feel something else, something warm, something soft, something he hadn't felt in years. He turned his head slightly and took another breath deeper, this time like he was pulling a lost memory out of the air. Selah shifted uncomfortably, expecting him to move or frown or cover his nose like others did, but Liam just leaned forward, placed his tray on the table and spoke. "This seat taken?" he asked casually. She shook her head slowly, still silent, still staring. Then, "It's mine now," he said, and began to eat without another word. Whispers began to ripple through the cafeteria, fast, like wildfire. Students leaned close to one another, some pointing, some laughing, some frowning, but Liam didn't care. He didn't even notice. He was too busy savoring both his food and that strange nostalgic scent that filled the space between them. It reminded him of something far away, something lost, something buried deep in the hills where he used to play as a child, the woods behind his grandmother's house, where the air was thick with moss and pine and the smoke of her old wood stove. The memory came rushing back, clear and strong, and for the first time since he had left Earth, Liam felt something like home. Selah finally found her voice, and it was soft, like the first touch of wind before a storm. "Why are you sitting here?" she asked. Not angrily, not with fear, just with confusion. "Because it's a seat, and I was hungry, and you looked like you could use some company," he said. Between bite, she lowered her eyes again, but this time not from shame or sadness, but because something inside her cracked open a little, like a seed beginning to sprout. She wasn't used to kindness. She wasn't used to anyone seeing her as anything but a problem. "Your scent," Liam said suddenly. "You know, it smells like rain and firewood and forest." She looked up, surprised and unsure how to respond. So he see. The next day, the sky above the academy shimmered with soft hues of blue and gold as the sun filtered through the transparent ceiling domes, and the students moved through the halls like a river of colors and noise. Yet in one small corner of the cafeteria, a girl with silver skin sat alone, her tray untouched, her shoulders tense, as if expecting the emptiness beside her to return. But today, it Din Lime walked in with steady steps, his eyes scanning the tables until he saw her, and the corner of his mouth lifted, not with mockery, not with pity, but with quiet certainty that he belonged there beside her. And when he sat down, he did not hesitate. Not even for a moment. Sayla turned her head slightly, her long dark hair moving like liquid night across her shoulder, and she looked at him with the same disbelief as yesterday, only now mixed with a strange new feeling. One she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. "Hope you came back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, like she was afraid it might scare him off. "Of course I did," Liam replied, while unwrapping his food and placing it neatly in front of him. "I told you I would." She lowered her gaze, hiding the small smile that tried to climb up her lips, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of her tray as the scent around her thickened again, earthy, smoky, old, like memories tied to soil and sky. Liam paused for a moment, letting that scent fill his lungs again. It was so strong, so familiar, it tugged at something buried deep in his chest, something that felt like home, but also like loss, like someone you missed, but could never name. "You know," he said slowly, "when I was a kid, I used to spend every summer in the mountains on Earth with my grandmother. Her cabin was surrounded by trees tall and ancient, and every morning she would light the old wood stove to make tea, and the smoke would curl into the air just like this scent around you. It smelled like burning pine needles and wet bark and fresh rain on old stones." Sayla looked at him a little more directly now, her green eyes shining softly in the filtered light, and her voice carried both curiosity and disbelief as she asked, "And you liked that smell?" "I loved it," Liam answered. "It meant safety, warmth, stories told by fire, and the sound of wind in the leaves. It meant home." She blinked slowly, absorbing his words like water into dry soil, and something in her scent changed. Subtly, it grew lighter, softer, still wild, but now tinged with something sweeter, like blooming moss and spring. "My people," Sayla said quietly, "come from a forest world too, or at least we used to before the mining ships came, before the fires, before everything turned to ash and smoke, and we had to flee." Liam didn't speak, he just listened, and she continued, her voice steadier now. "We used to live in harmony with nature, not above it. We breathed with it, lived with it, grew with it, and the scent you smell around me is part of that part of the bond between us and the world that raised ooze." She looked away again, her fingers curling around the edge of her tray. "Most here think it is a curse or a disease, something that makes me less than them, than they've forgotten what life used to smell like," Liam said softly, "and maybe they never knew." Silence hung between them for a moment, not awkward, but full, like a pause between notes in a melody, and in that silence, Sayla felt something warm inside her, like a root finding water after seasons of drought. "Why do you care?" she asked, finally, her voice barely audible. "Why do you talk to me when others run?" "Because I think you've been carrying something beautiful alone for too long," he replied, "and I don't like seeing beauty buried under fear." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she took a slow breath, her chest rising as the scent around her pulsed gently through the air, and for the first time since she arrived at the academy, someone inhaled that scent, not with disgust, but with a sense of peace. Some still spaced, some still whispered, some still frowned, but a few looked with quiet wonder, some even hesitated, as if trying to catch a piece of the air between Sayla and Liam, as if sensing there was something there worth understanding. Liam reached into his bag and pulled out a small glass vial, sealed with a wooden cork, and inside it was a bit of dry, dark soil from his grandmother's garden. He placed it gently on the table between them and said, "Smell." The Sayla did, and her eyes widened in surprise. "It smells like me," she said. "No." Liam said, "It smells like Usei." Looked at him, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like hiding. Continued, "It's familiar. I like it. No one has ever said that before." She whispered, "Most call it disgusting." "Then most are wrong," he replied simply. Bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch break, and students began to rise. But Liam stayed seated for a moment longer, finishing the last bite of his meal, Then he stood up and nodded to her. "Same time tomorrow," he said, and walked away without waiting for her answer. She sat there, frozen, the scent around her unchanged, but something inside her was already beginning to shift. For the first time in a long time, someone had stayed, someone had smiled, someone had remembered. The seat beside her wasn't empty anymore, neither was she. The sun rose higher the next morning, casting long golden beams across the academy halls, but the warmth outside could not melt the growing frost inside the minds of many students, as whispers began to spread like wildfire through dorm rooms, lecture pods, and message boards. They spoke of the alien girl with the strange scent and the human boy who sat with her. They spoke of contamination, of danger, of sickness. Some even claimed they felt dizzy after walking past her table, though none of them had any proof, only fear feeding fear. Sayla walked into the cafeteria with slower steps, her heart pounding beneath her silver skin, her eyes scanning the faces around her, searching for Liam, afraid he might have heard the rumors, afraid he might have changed his mind. But he was already there, sitting in their spot, waving at her like nothing in the world had shifted. She sat down without a word, her shoulders tight, her scent coiling thicker around her than before, sharp with anxiety and bitter. Like burned leaves, Liam noticed it, but said nothing. Instead, he placed a warm tea flask in front of her, and smiled. "I brought this from the vending machine," he said, hoping it tastes like the forest again. She managed a faint smile, but her fingers trembled as she reached for the cup. The whispers had gotten to her. Even if she didn't show it, she could feel the weight of every glance, every giggle, every turned back pressing against her like invisible stones. Liam leaned in, his voice low and calm. "I heard them too, but I don't care you should care," Sayla replied quietly. "You sit with me, they think you're contaminated too. Then let them think," Liam said with a shrug. "I'd rather smell like you than think like them." She looked at him, her expression unreadable, and he continued, "They're afraid of what they don't understand, but you know what scares them more? The idea that someone like you might be more connected to life than they ever were." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. Student had collapsed near the serving counter, and the entire cafeteria erupted into chaos. A few rushed to help, while others stood frozen, and then someone shouted, it's her scent." She did this. All heads turned towards Sayla and Liam. A sea of accusing eyes locking on them, her breath caught in her throat, and her hands gripped the edge of the table as if trying to hold on to reality. Liam stood up instantly, placing himself between her and the crowd, his voice firm and sharp. "Back off," he snapped. "You don't know anything, eh?" Staff member approached, his eyes cold and calculating. "Miss Sayla, the principal would like to see you immediately." She stood slowly, her legs heavy, her heart heavier, and without another word, she followed the man out of the room as the scent around her turned darker and more sorrowful than ever before. Liam watched her go, and then grabbed his tray with sudden frustration, slamming it down in the bin and storming out. He didn't care what they thought. He knew what he felt. He knew what she was, and he wasn't going to let their ignorance rewrite her truth. In the principal's office, Sayla sat stiffly across from a panel of officials, their expressions unreadable, their questions sharp and cold. They asked about her scent, about her abilities, about her planet. They spoke in tones of control and suspicion. "Not curiosity," she answered calmly, hiding the storm within her, until one of them said, "Your scent may be triggering adverse effects in other species. We may have to recommend relocation for the safety of the student body." Something inside her cracked. She lowered her head, her voice trembling. "You don't understand what this scent is. It's not poison. It's history. It's my ancestors. It's my home." But the panel only exchanged glances and made notes on their tablets. When she returned to her dorm, Liam was already there, sitting on the steps outside, waiting for her, his eyes searching her face as she approached. "Well," he asked, "they want to send me away," she said simply. "Then we fight," Liam replied. "You Don't have to get involved, she said. I already am involved, he answered, because the moment I smelled that forest in you, I remembered who I was before the noise, before the concrete. Before the forgetting, she sat beside him, her scent slowly changing again. Not bitter, not scared, but calm like moss growing on stone, and for a moment, neither of them spoke then. Liam pulled out a device and tapped the Academy's live feed settings. With a few swipes, he opened a student forum and began to type. They say her scent is dangerous, he wrote, but maybe it's not her that's dangerous. Maybe it's the truth. She carries the truth that we lost something important, that we forgot what it means to belong to a world. Instead of trying to control, I'd hit post and leaned back. Let them read it, he said. Let them feel something. Zayla looked at him with a mix of gratitude and awe. No one had ever stood for her like that, not even her own. People before the Fally are strange, Liam, she whispered. And you're beautiful, he replied, not just outside, but in the way your presence reminds me I still have roots. And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. The night was quiet. Outside the Academy domes, stars shimmered across the dark sky, like distant fires flickering in the cold, and the wind carried a soft hum through the leaves of the Academy garden, where plants from 100 worlds grew in careful harmony, and in the middle of that garden, Zayla stood barefoot, her eyes closed, her arms outstretched, her silver skin glowing faintly under the moonlight, as if the stars themselves remembered her. She moved slowly, her hands brushing against petals, vines, stems, her breath steady and deep, and with every movement the plants responded. They swayed, they pulsed, they leaned closer, as if listening, and around her the scent grew rich and layered. No longer just earthy, but alive with something that could not be defined. Something ancient, something holy behind a tall, glowing fern. Liam watched silently, unsure whether to step forward or stay hidden, afraid to disturb the sacred rhythm unfolding before him. But the moment he shifted his foot, the leaves rustled, and Zayla turned her eyes, finding him instantly, her expression unreadable for a second, and then soft with something like relief. Followed me, she said, not angry, not surprised. Liam stepped out slowly, his voice low. I was curious, the others said. You disappeared after the hearing, and I was worried. I needed to breathe. Zayla replied simply, and this is the only place where I can do that without fear. He walked closer, slowly, careful not to step on the vines that curled along the path, and when he reached her, the scent surrounded him again, but this time it was different, stronger, yet somehow clearer, and he realized it was not the same scent she carried in the cafeteria. It was something deeper, something more primal. You do this often, he asked, standing beside her. Only when I feel like forgetting myself, she answered, because here I remember that I am more than what they see. She moved her hand toward a thick vine, wrapped around a pale blue tree, and with a gentle touch, the vine shifted, opening like a flower, revealing a glowing pod that released a burst of fragrance into the air, and Liam staggered back, not from disgust, but from sudden memory. He saw forests he had never visited, mountains he had never climbed, rivers he had never swum in, and yet all of them felt like home. All of them felt like him, and he gasped as the images faded, leaving only a deep warmth in his chest. What was that, he asked, his voice shaking. A memory, she said. Not yours, not mine, but from the world my people lost long ago. Our scent carries memory, not just emotion. It carries places, moments, lives. It is our way of remembering who we were. Liam sat on a low stone bench beside a cluster of glowing flowers, his head still spinning, and Zayla sat beside him, her fingers resting lightly on her knee, her gaze lifted to the stars. We used to live in places like this, she said softly. Forests that breathed with us, listened to us, responded to our joy and pain. When we left them, when we fled from fire and greed, we lost our connection, and now all that is left is this scent, this whisper of what once was, but it is powerful, Liam said, still amazed. You made me feel something I have never known because you are open, she replied. Most are not. They close their minds and hearts and call us dangerous when all we are is different. He looked at her, then really looked, and saw not an alien girl with a strange scent, but a soul carrying a forest in her breath. A living memory wrapped in flesh and sorrow and courage. You said they want to send you away. He said they want to protect what they do not understand, she answered, and fear makes them cruel then. We make them understand, he said, standing again, his hands curling into fists. We show them that your scent is not a threat but a gift. They will not listen, she said, her voice sad and tired. They will if we make them feel, he replied, and maybe it will not be all at once, maybe not even many, but one by one they will see what I see. Sela stood slowly, her body glowing faintly in the night, and the plants around them seemed to bow as she moved, the scent lifting into the air like music do. You really believe that? She asked. I believe in you, he said. In that moment, the scent around her shifted again, wild and clean, and full of life, not from memory, not from sorrow, but from the present, from hope, from belief, and the flowers bloomed brighter, and the vines lifted higher, as if the forest within her had just begun to wake. They stood together in that garden as the stars watched, and the wind carried her scent beyond the walls, beyond the fear, beyond the whispers, into the night, where even silence could smell her truth. The academy had never known silence like this, the kind that hummed beneath the walls, the kind that made lights flicker and screens go black for a heartbeat, before coming alive again with static and flickers and warnings, and then a sound echoed across every hallway, every dorm, every classroom, a sharp electric shriek that tore through the air like a scream, and panic followed behind it fast and loudly. Liam had been sitting in the library when the alarm started, and he jumped to his feet, heart pounding as red lights pulsed above his head, warning of a threat unknown. Danger approaching, all students return to safe zones. The message repeated over and over, but he didn't listen, not when his first thought was not about himself, but about Sela. Cross campus, Sela stood frozen in a corridor as students shoved past her, running in every direction, some with fear in their eyes, some with confusion, none of them stopping for her, none of them noticing that her scent had changed again, sharp like pine needles, burnt like ash, her breath quick and shallow, and her hands trembling as distant sounds of crashing metal echoed through the academy halls. Scavengers had come, not people, not creatures, but machines, half broken, half sentient, rogue collectors that roamed abandoned systems in search of tech and energy, and when they found an open gate or a weak shield, they came crawling like metal insects, hungry and relentless. Sela ducked behind a doorway, trying to stay out of sight as one of the scavenger drones floated past, its single red eye glowing, its limbs twitching, its body covered in rust and stolen parts, and when it paused, she held her breath, praying it would move on, praying she would not be seen, but her scent betrayed her. It always did. The drone turned slowly, scanning the air, its systems detecting something unfamiliar, something organic and old and rare, and it moved toward her with a screech of grinding gears, ready to strike hand. Then Liam appeared. He slammed into the drone from the side, knocking it against the wall, sparks flying as metal hit stone, and it spun wildly, trying to reorient itself. But Liam grabbed Sela's hand and pulled her down another hallway, running fast, not looking back, not until they reached a sealed door and ducked inside, breathing hard. What was that thing? She asked, eyes wide, voice shaking. Scavenger drone, Liam said, wiping sweat from his brow. Probably slipped through one of the outer shields, looking for energy or tech, or maybe just drawn by something it didn't understand. Drawn by me, she whispered, her scent turning bitter again, heavy with guilt. No, Liam said firmly, drawn by life. Drawn by something it hasn't touched in centuries, drawn by what you carry the room around them was small, filled with unused lab equipment and old plant samples and broken panels, and Liam began to pull pieces together quickly. wiring up a makeshift barrier while Selah stood still, watching him with eyes that wanted to believe he had. "A plan you should have gone to the safe zone," she said. "Quietly and leave you to face that thing alone," he replied. "Not a chance another." Crash echoed nearby, louder this time, closer, and the walls shook slightly as dust fell from the ceiling and the lights. Flickered again. Liam paused, breathing hard, then turned to her. "You said the forest responded to your emotions. Can you do that again here?" Now she hesitated, then nodded slowly, closing her eyes and breathing deep, trying to find that center again. That root inside her that connected her to more than fear, and slowly the scent began to shift again. Not sweet, not calm, but wild, fierce, like storm winds through trees like roots. Breaking stone. The plants in the room stirred small at first, then faster. Their vines stretching, their leaves lifting as if waking from deep sleep, and they turned toward her scent, toward her command, and then the door burst open. The drone rushed in, screeching, claws out its eye, glowing, and it surged forward until the plant's moved vines snapped out like whips, grabbing the machine, dragging it backward, slamming it into the wall, thorns piercing wires. Leaves wrapping metal limbs, and the drone sparked and shrieked and struggled, but it could not escape. And within seconds, it was silent, its eye flickering out as the last vine squeezed tight. Liam stood in awe, watching the aftermath, breathing heavily, and then turned to her, his face filled with something between amazement and pride. The Great Council Hall of the Academy stood like a monument to order, its high ceilings arched with glass and silver, its walls lined with flags from 100 planets, its floors polished to reflect every step, and today, its seats were full, its silence was deep, and its eyes were all fixed on the girl with silver skin, who stood alone in the center of the chamber, her scent drifting through the air, not fearful, not angry, but calm and wild, like the breath of a forest after rain. Selah stood tall, her hands by her sides, her gaze unwavering, while voices murmured around her, voices of council members, professors, safety officers, and student leaders, each one armed with questions, opinions, doubts, and none of them willing to understand what they refused to feel. Beside her sat Liam, not in the circle of power, but just close enough to be heard and far enough to be ignored, his presence allowed only because he refused to stay away, because he believed silence was more dangerous than standing up. And now the time had come to speak. The first counselor, an elder with blue skin and gold eyes, raised a thin hand, and the murmurs ceased. "Selah, of the Verdari system, you are brought before us for review of conduct, safety risk, and potential relocation due to biological incompatibility with the Academy population. How do you respond?" "I respond with truth," she said, her voice steady. "I am not a danger. I am a memory. I am not a weapon. I am a bond. My scent is not poison. It is nature speaking, and you do not listen." A murmur passed through the room again, and another counselor, a human professor, leaned forward. "Your scent has been linked to multiple disruptions, fainting incidents, and emotional responses. Can you deny this?" "I do not deny that others feel something," she replied. "But what they feel is not harm. It is discomfort with something they do not understand, something they have forgotten. The forests, the soil, the ancient air of places that once breathed with life. I carry that echo, and it frightens them, because it reminds them of what they lost." The professor frowned. "And what proof do you offer that your presence is not a biological threat?" Liam stood then, stepping into the center beside her, holding a small object in his hands, a sealed vial filled with dark soil, and as he spoke, his voice rang clear across the hall. "This is earth soil from the mountains where I grew up. It carries the same scent as Selah's presence, because both are born of untouched nature. When I smell her scent, I do not feel sick. I feel memory, I feel peace." "And what of the attack last week?" asked another member, sharp and stern. "You were near the scavenger drones. They moved toward your location, some claim. Your scent attracted them." Selah took a breath, then spoke slowly. "The drones seek energy signals, data noise. I carry none of those. They move toward me, not because I am dangerous, but because I am different. I fought them with the only thing I had, the connection to life that still answers me. Even now, she opened her palm, and a vine crept from her sleeve, green and pulsing, and alive, curling around her wrist, not threatening, not wild, but present and powerful, and the room grew still as the plant swayed gently, as if listening. One counselor stood tall and imposing and said, "This power you display cannot be left unchecked. Your scent affects the minds of those around you, and even if unintentional, it could disrupt harmony. Should we not act in the name of safety?" Then Liam spoke again, his voice harder now. "If safety means removing what is different than this place is no academy. It is a cage. You cannot teach unity while punishing uniqueness. You cannot preach peace while fearing life itself." Hall trembled not with sound, but with silence deep and full. And then the head counselor, an ancient being with skin like cracked stone, raised both hands and said, "We will vote now, all who believe Sayla should be relocated. Raise your hand." Hands lifted, some with certainty, some with hesitation, and then the second call. "All who believe she should stay and be understood, raise your hand." More hands lifted this time, and the count was close to close, but then the head counselor lowered his gaze and said, "The vote is tied, and by tradition, I must break the tie." He looked at Sayla for a long moment, then turned to the others and said, "I have smelled her presence. I have walked her garden, and I say this scent is not one of danger, but of forgotten beauty. She stays." The hall erupted, some in protest, some in awe, and Sayla stood frozen, not from fear, but from the weight that had just lifted. The scent around her changed once again. Not sad, not wild, but blooming like spring rising from cold ground. Liam stepped closer and whispered, "You did it." She turned to him and said, "No, we did it." Tanned as they left the chamber, the students who once turned away now looked with open eyes. Not all with acceptance, not all with kindness, but with curiosity, and curiosity was a statue. "Just commanded nature to fight back," he said. With wonder, "I didn't command it," she said softly. "It listened because I stopped hiding outside." More drones could be heard in the distance, alarms still echoing, but for a moment they were safe together and stronger than ever. And Liam looked at her and said, "The academy needs to see this. They need to see who you are." She nodded slowly, her scent still strong but steady. Now no longer a burden, no longer just a memory, but a force that could shape the present and maybe even the future. They stepped out of the room together, ready to face what was coming, not with fear, but with roots planted deep in truth. The morning light poured through the academy's glass dome, like liquid gold casting long beams across the marble floors and shimmering off the leaves of the indoor garden that now bloomed brighter than ever before. Vines curled around the pillars. Flowers opened with every step Sayla took, and the scent that once drove others away now drifted freely through the halls, not as something feared, but as something noticed, as something remembered. Sayla walked slowly through the corridor where weeks ago students had avoided her, where whispers had poisoned the air, where loneliness had followed her like a shadow, and today her shadow walked beside another, the human who never left, the one who smelled the forest in her and stayed. Liam smiled as they walked, and his presence was no longer strange, no longer rebellious, but simply reties followed them, still not with hate, not with fear, but with wonder, some curious, some hesitant, a few even smiling, and one student stepped forward, awkward and unsure, holding a small potted plant with trembling hands, and said, "I think this used to grow on your planet. I found it in the botany archives, and I wanted you to have it." Sayla accepted the gift with gentle fingers, her scent blooming into something sweet and warm like sun on wet leaves, and she whispered, "Thank you," and the student nodded before hurrying away. Cheeks flushed, but not from shame, from hope. Word of the council decision had spread across the academy faster than any rumor had ever moved, and now students whispered not about her danger, but about her courage, about the vines she controlled, about the drones she faced, about the memories she carried in her scent, and in time The story twisted less and became more. Trullium had documented everything with Sayla's permission. He had uploaded the footage of the garden, the trial, to Drone Attack, and the response was overwhelming, not just from the Academy, but from planets where nature had been forgotten, from people who read her words and remembered something buried in their hearts, people who had never met her but swore they could smell her presence through the screen. A message arrived that afternoon from a Council of Planetary Restoration, a request not for removal, but for cooperation. They wanted Sayla's help to reintroduce natural memory to terraformed lands, places where soil forgot how to breathe. They believed her connection was the key to helping planets heal, and for the first time, Sayla did not feel like a student or a threat. She felt like a bridge. The garden that had once been her secret sanctuary became something more. Students volunteered to help her expand it, planting seeds brought from homeworlds, watering roots with care they had never shown before, and the air inside that space began to change, no longer sharp, no longer alien, but balanced and beautiful, a mix of scents and memories. From every corner of the stars, Liam built a bench under the tallest tree and carved their names in a stone nearby, not for glory, not for praise, but for remembrance, because stories fade and scents drift, but names can stay if placed with love. One evening, Sayla sat on that bench, watching the sky as the stars blinked awake, and she said quietly, "I never thought this would happen. Not here, not like this." Liam looked at her and said, "Because you never stopped being yourself, even when it hurt, even when they hated you, and now they smell what I smelled all along." She turned to him, her eyes soft, her voice a whisper. "I was ready to leave, ready to disappear if they made me, but you didn't," he replied. "You stayed," and they followed the scent. The breeze carried her laughter, gentle and true, and it danced with the leaves and vines and petals, as if the garden itself laughed too. Later, a group of younger students passed through the garden, their voices hushed, their eyes wide, and one pointed toward Sayla, whispering, "She's the one who smells like stories and forests and old worlds," and another added, "She smells like home." Sayla heard them, but said nothing. Instead, she leaned her head against Liam's shoulder, her eyes closed, her breath steady, her scent calm and whole. And in that moment, she was no longer the girl who had to sit alone. No longer the one who sent emptied rooms. She was something else, something, more. She was the girl who reminded them what it meant to belong. She was the girl who smelled like home.